Let's install some brand new running boards on the Rivian.
On today's video, I'm going to completely walk you through the install of these running boards here, the Generation 1 Rivian right behind me. The company I got this from, EV Base, is a company I've also gotten running boards for my Cybertruck in the past, so I'm pretty knowledgeable on how they go up, and I feel like the fact that I've had these on my truck now for a year and a half, I can speak to their quality and their rigidity as well as their longevity of how they'll hold up over time. But why would you want to put running boards in your truck in the first place? 3 reasons, the first of which is to step up into the truck. Maybe you don't need it, but it's often super helpful for your passengers, especially if it's a little kid, people that are elderly, maybe somebody with an injury, to get up into that truck. Number 2, I use them as somewhere to wipe my feet. Where I'm at here in Colorado, we have snow 6, 7, 8, 9 months a year potentially, so having somewhere to like wipe your feet off before stepping in the car really saves the interior of your car. When you look at it like that, it's really a matter of protecting your investment that is your vehicle that you're using day in, day out. And number 3, when you have a sturdy enough running board that bolts to the frame like this one does here, it actually can help protect your car from curbs, some rocks, if you're off-roading, things like that. So to show you an example, a very similar set I put on my truck about a year and a half ago, I had on it looks like this. If you'll notice, this bracket here is totally bent down. It was at a total 90-degree angle from this. This bent when I hit a big rock off-roading in my truck, and it mangled this frame. Now the running board itself looked totally fine, and the more important thing was it saved the truck. On these electric vehicles, that whole bottom of the truck is a battery, so anything you can put down below to protect it is a huge plus. I'm telling you, whether it's this set or some other set, take my advice, use some running boards. It'll save the interior of your truck, it'll save you from potential damage, and it helps everybody get in your truck. This can be a pretty simple and pretty straightforward process. There are some steps that if you do wrong and things you mess up are gonna really make this hard for you. If you yourself aren't handy and don't have at least a few tools, it's gonna make this a little bit difficult for you, but the chances are you know somebody like this, and if you have somebody give you a hand, it can make this process really simple. Again, I'll do my best to walk you through all these steps and show you exactly what you need to do and exactly what you should not do. One benefit of these running board brackets is they are labeled really well. So running boards I put on in the past often had either an L or an R, which was for left or right. But then you had to determine what was right and left to that particular manufacturer. Is it left as if you're driving the car, or left as if you're looking at the car? Well, these ones clear it up because they're all labeled driver's side and passenger side, so there's no really confusion. While this kit does technically come with every wrench you need to install this, I still use my own, and let me show you why. As we get down into it, you'll see that there's 3 different bolts. They're gonna look like this on the bottom side, and they're gonna take a T55, like a Torx wrench, and although this little wrench they give you does seem very sturdy and stout, it has a little bit too much play, and it's gonna make it really susceptible to stripping this out. There is still a decent amount of play. So for the reasons you just saw and some others, I'm gonna recommend against using this tool. I would use something much more like this. You can still get a T55, but get something that fits on a socket. And furthermore, I'd probably recommend against using a typical socket wrench, which I'd almost never do, but I really think for this particular job, for these 3 bolts, it'd be really helpful to have an impact wrench like this, where I can have that little socket head on it. Then taking your T55 socket and just sliding it on your wrench. And the reason you'd rather have an impact wrench compared to the socket is an impact wrench is turning 1,000 times a second, hitting that little bolt over and over and over. Different than your socket wrench, which is just one little push, because those bolts underneath are made of a soft metal, and one large pull is gonna bend and strip out that interior, whereas the impact is gonna hit it over and over until it actually breaks loose. It's helpful to be able to go forward and back to break that initial oomph where it's stuck in. Now, if you could source an automotive impact wrench like this one here, it's even better. It's got that little socket end on the head, and same thing, it's also gonna ratchet. But if you don't have a T55 Torx, which is not the most common of size, a 9mm, a male 9mm will actually work. This is something that we'd probably more likely call like an Allen wrench. So the first thing I had to do to get these running boards on is there's actually some plastic pieces here below the bottom line of the truck that I have to pull off. And again, they give you the tools to do this, but I always use my own. So you're gonna need 2 different things here. You're gonna need a T20 Torx bit and then a 10mm socket. And that's to get this first piece of plastic on, which is here in the front of the truck. And once you get that first piece of plastic off underneath here, then there's another longer piece that just pulls out with some clips. So this first one, you'll see the first 10mm, then the 2 Torx, and the other 10mm in the back. You just pull all these out, then this little piece of plastic just clips out. And so that first piece pops right up just like you saw, and the reason you need to take this piece off first is this lip overlaps what I would call the tongue of the other piece of plastic, which you can see here. Now, I think it's a whole lot easier to pull off the ones here from the middle of the truck first, because these last ones here are a little bit more difficult, so I'm gonna start with pulling off these all the way down. Again, these are just plastic, so you have to balance enough force, but also being delicate. And then for these final little clips here along the outside of the car, It does supply you a little trim tool like this, little plastic crowbar. But again, I'm gonna upgrade. I'm gonna be using my own, and I don't need like this big demolition style crowbar. But this little guy here is gonna give me a little bit more strength to pull these under. Now, when you're putting this underneath to pry,
You'll eventually notice there's a little piece of metal that these clips are going into. You see it right there. You want to stick this little crowbar in underneath that piece of metal. You don't want to be prying down on that. You want to be prying just between the plastic and where that little metal receiver of the clips is. These clips are pretty tough. In fact, they're tougher than what I'm used to seeing, and they're spaced out every maybe 4 to 6 inches all the way down.
now once you pull both of these pieces of plastic off, you're not gonna need these anymore. You're just gonna wanna store these somewhere safely in your garage so you know where they're at later in case you ever had to put them back on. Now to put the brackets on. Now you're gonna have 3 of these for each side, and as I mentioned earlier, they're all really well labeled. Now this little flat part, this is gonna be what the running board puts on, and this little split L is gonna be what goes actually underneath the truck. You're gonna have to find the 2 different bolts, obviously, one for each of these that are gonna come out. So one's just a large hex bolt, that'll be pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The second is what I referenced earlier, is that's that T55, that Torx bolt. So as we take a look underneath, there's a lot of them though, all underneath. There's a bunch of these standard ones, there's a bunch of these little Torx ones. You're gonna have to take your bracket and just kind of line it up where you think it makes sense 3 different times, evenly spacing out these brackets here along the bottom of the car. Let's take a look at this first spot.
I'm looking for the first 2 sets of bolts that both line up. So this bottom one here obviously would work, but then it doesn't. So now I'm lining up that Torx one there and the 17 millimeter here on the back. And that's when I know I have it in the right spot. So that's where I'll be starting here and here.
So to get that bigger bolt out that you just saw, I'm gonna be using a 17 millimeter. So we have 3 brackets we've already discussed that go along the center of the car. There's actually 4 different spots where they actually work. And so you have to use just a little bit of like common sense of how you think you'd want them. I generally want them to go farther towards the back rather than up here at the front. I think there's a better chance or a higher chance of your passengers, most likely little kids, using that running board in the back. It's kind of common sense, but like I shifted towards the outside. I'll show you on one that's already on to kind of best show you what I'm talking about. Okay, this is the passenger side. I've already got these boards on. As you can kind of see a little bit behind me, that you can see there is one board around there. There's another bracket right here, almost at the middle point of the door brake. And there's one more here towards the back of the car. But I'd rather these 2 here closer in the back than have 2 closer here in the front where I'm not really stepping right in this joint anyway.
All right, so this drill I'm using, I referenced it earlier. It's like an automotive version of a M18 drill that drives a socket. And again, it's hard for me to stress really how tight this bolt is. This drill that I'm using is an absolute beast. And still I have to really work forward and backward to get this bolt to break loose. And as you can see here, finally come down. The benefit of this is this bolt is incredibly stout, which should hold the board well.
Now, hopefully you saw there that even with it backing out, it wasn't budging. So what I did is I went forward a little bit, then back out, forward a little bit, then back out. It took me 2 or 3 times loose, and I could just see the slightest bit of turn, but then it finally cracked. Once it cracked, then it came out. You are not gonna get these out by hand. Don't try to do it, especially with that wrench that came with the kit. Get yourself something that you can put on an impact or like a Torx wrench.
So using that 17 millimeter socket I referenced earlier on that large impact drill, I pulled that bolt out, and now it's a matter of just putting it right back in. And then again, I grabbed that T55 Torx, again on the end of that impact wrench, and snugged that down tight. Also, once I got it mostly tight, I just went ahead and banged this around because you want this to stick totally perpendicular to the truck and not to be crooked at all. Then once you get it perfectly straight, I went ahead and snug these both back down, the Torx and the 17 millimeter.
First of all, forgive me for all these shots of laying on the ground. It's just the easiest way to show you. So this is the first bracket we just put in. This is right even with like the front of the driver's seat. As I was talking about earlier, there's a spot for it here, right here, but I'm only about, I'm gonna say 14 inches away. So these 2 are really close together. And I don't know that I'd ever use this right here. Just need this as a pressure point. But if I come down here to where I'm kind of at the brake spot of where the 2 doors shut, and this is more of a gap, so probably about 30 inches or so, which is a much more logical break point.
Now, while this particular scene is sped up 2 times, you can still see I'm working this bolt forward and backward 4 and 5 times before it finally breaks loose to be able to be backed out. Whereas the more standard 17 millimeter bolt just pops right out every time. Just like the first one, once I had both these bolts started, I made sure that bracket was perpendicular to the truck and then snugged it up.
All right, then our third and final bracket is gonna be way down here by the end of where you have this other little plastic panel on, but you don't need to pull that off. And then of course, once you have both those 2 bolts out, you're gonna put both of them right back into the same spots you took out to bolt the bracket to the frame of the truck. So you can see here, those are the 3 brackets. Got them all on there.
And when you step back and look at them, you can see there is a larger gap from the center to the left, but that gap would be even larger if you move the bracket to its left. And I like the weight distribution closer to the rear.
If you're somebody who you're the only one getting in your car and you are a little bit larger, if you know what I mean, then sure, go ahead. You could slide that one closer to the front and give yourself more supports up there. I don't suppose it matters either way. But once you're actually ready to connect it, you're gonna use these little things here. So this is what I'm gonna call a shim. It has like these two bolts. These are like welded on. So this is all one piece, which makes it really nice. So when you go to put the nut on the bottom, you don't have to hold back on the top side. Let me show you down here how these go on.
So these threaded bolt part of the shim are going to slide down into those two open ovals of the bracket. But of course, not until it's hooked to the board. You can see underneath where the nuts are going to go. So the shim is actually going to hook to the board by just turning slightly at a 45-degree angle and kind of hooking underneath that little lip of the metal before it flips on. But before you start putting the shims and nuts into place, balance it here on the brackets first.
So once I have the running board in place, I'm going to take the little shim and kind of wiggle it underneath here. But I want to make sure I get all three of these in place before I start tightening them. So once I tighten it, I can't lift the board up anymore, and I need to lift it in order to be able to slide this through. With it flush down to that bracket, I can't fit this in.
So as you'll see here, I just go one by one, starting with the rear, but even that doesn't matter. Just lift the board slightly enough to slide this shim into place, and then pushing it down those threaded parts into those little ovular spots. Same thing here on the middle one, lifting up the board slightly, sliding the threads through. Then of course, same thing on the last one. For each of these nuts, you're gonna have a washer, a lock washer, and a nut. And it is important to add that lock washer to each of these little 6 studs because that's what's gonna keep these nuts from unthreading as you drive down the street. So it is important. Now, I didn't have to get these wrench tight. They're all just finger tight as is. And that's probably the way I'd recommend doing it because it does allow it to flex around a little bit before you snug them all down. Before I do that, this is the point where if I want to adjust this at all, in or out or up or back, this is where I need to do it right now. You have some amount of flexibility of how you can push this in or out. You can see this, it's fudging in quite a bit. I can also move this more to the back or more to the left. And not that you can't change this once you tighten it, you can always loosen it, move it around. But I would suggest opening the doors of your car to kind of figuring out what makes sense for the positioning of your board specifically. So as you can see here, as I put my body weight on the board, you can see why I'd really only need one central bracket there. But as I go here to the back, you'll see I can actually enter into the second row, but also I want this to be towards the back because also a child, or I guess an adult, could enter into that third row. So you see here, I'm just sliding the whole running board farther back to my right there towards the back wheel of the car. Also, I'm bringing my board a little bit out away from the car. Just know it is sticking out wider than the wheelbase at the moment. And once I have it settled in where I want it, and again, if anyone else is doing this, you get it where you want it, then you actually get these bolts and do get these tight.
And once you finish snugging in those bottom bolts, it's that simple. You're done. You've got yourself a brand new running board. How long should something like this take? If you have a T55 Torx or a similar 9mm and you have some kind of Torx wrench, an impact wrench you can use, this project should take you about an hour. I think it took me about 30 minutes, but I do have good experience with this and I do have all the right tools. I would highly recommend against using the included Torx wrench or a socket wrench. Get yourself that impact and you're gonna knock this out in an hour, maybe hour and a half if you're not really familiar with this kind of thing. But even with this, if you're watching this video and you think, yeah, that's cool, I'd like to get running boards, I don't have the tools and I just don't know if I have the time or wherewithal to tackle that. If you're ever in the Denver, Colorado area, hit me up down in the comments below. I'd be happy to shoot you a quote to see what I'd charge you to put these on your vehicle. It's a simple process and it's probably cheaper than you'd think. And the fact that these are made with a solid steel and that they're bolted in with those gigantic bolts into the frame of the car, durability is a non-factor with these. These will hold you and any of your mates all at the same time. If this at all interests you, subscribe to the channel because I'm going to be throwing another set of running boards on my other Rivian in coming weeks. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.